Okay, I think the question is, how did Tim Rainey become Tim Rainey? And um, I can very honestly say that I remember starting to put things together when I was about 5 years old, and I knew I was a scientist then. That was my dream.
How did you know something like that?
The I knew that wanted. I had the curiosity. I wanted to look at how things function, how they're put together. I think I can't remember anybody doing anything that would really encourage me until I got into grade school. Um, we had um, some absolutely wacky, good sixth grade teachers in science. I think that's where it really began to gel. And somewhere in the around 12 years of age, for whatever reason, I began to put together a life's plan. And I knew what I wanted. I knew where I wanted to go. Um, I knew I wanted a family. Um, and I knew what it was going to take to put all that together. And the main thing that I knew was I was on my own. Um, and my late friend Charles Roof and I just discussed it quite a bit. Um, how did I put all that together? How did I figure out where I needed to be? Um, why can't other people do that? What's it going to take to get a 12-year-old to get centered? I
To
think
get what?
to get centered.
Huh?
Think about what's in the future. What is it going to take? What do you actually want? And how are you going to get there? And I will say probably, I keep thinking about two men I knew that the younger generation will never know, and both of them survived the Bataan Death March. And I knew it was something awful. I knew that um, we couldn't walk up behind them. We couldn't make fast moves. We couldn't make noises. One of them had multiple scars on the back of his head because uh, whenever they line them up in the morning, teach them Japanese, and the soldiers stand behind them. If they missed a word, then hit them. And then I was fortunate to pick up one of those Marvel comic books that was was historically accurate, and it described the Bataan Death March, and I knew and understood exactly what made those men make it through that. And I knew then it didn't matter what anybody threw at me, couldn't be anything as bad as what they did and what they survived. So that was an inspiration. That was a milestone. Um, and then by the time I was 12, I was starting to put together a life's plan. When I was 13, I was in my freshman year of high school. I'd be turning 14 at the end of September, at the end of the month. And somebody came down the hall and said, "We need one more person for driver's ed." And I thought, well, maybe I can sneak in there. Well, wasn't sneaking in there because I could take the course, and I didn't turn 14 before we took the driver's test. And like most kids who are raised in a rural area, I already knew how to drive. I was cocky. I could drive at any stick shift, and which is what we were required to train on. So 5 weeks into my 14th birthday, I had a full-blown driver's license. So be careful what you wish for, because when the next summer before I turned 15, I came home and my cousin was sitting on the couch, and he perked up and looked at me and said, I hear you got a driver's license. And I said, I sure do. And he said, you want a job? And the next thing I knew, I was headed from Refugio, Texas, 300 and some odd miles southwest to work in construction in Big Spring, Texas, in the heat of the summer. My job was to drive the crew, and then when I got there, my job was to work with the crew. I left a man, weighed 150 pounds. I came back 185 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
My aunt stuffed me every chance that she got. I remember it was almost a contest to see if she could make enough food that teenager could cram down. And then that was it. That was absolutely part of my plan to get completely and totally on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was it. I was on my own, responsible for myself, making my own money. Well, without getting into any details, I was a product of an incredibly dysfunctional family.
Uh-huh.
Two parents who were badly, badly damaged by the Great Depression, and they never figured out their place in life or what they were doing or how they were. And as a scientist, what they were doing just made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It was not logical, wasn't rational, wasn't reasonable. So I knew I was going to be on my own. And when I got home that summer, ready to start school, basically I cut off all communication. And I had room and board. I lived there. I took care of myself. I did my laundry. I cooked my own food. And it was just like any other kid who leaves for college. No different. And and it was a really good learning experience. I had met this cute little girl when I was in the 5th grade, 10 years old. And she was in the 3rd grade, 8 years old. Her name was Jane Kuntz. She was the doctor's daughter from the neighboring town of Woodsboro. And she became one of my life's plans to marry her. And here we are pushing 70 years later, and we're still together. So 53 years of marriage. And it'd be 54 in August this summer. Pardon me, June. But anyway, it'll be 54 years. And the other thing that I wanted was I wanted a rural environment. I wanted land. I wanted cattle. Wanted all the toys that go with running a ranch. And so be careful what you wish for, because that's a part of me. I'm also a rancher, and have cattle. One of the best things I ever saw was the rear end of my horses leaving in a cattle trailer. It's like having a bunch of bad teenage boys around. And they get in more trouble. So anyway, the other thing was, how am I going to? We were going out spending time on my friends' inherited properties that had been deeded to members of the Republic of Texas Army, and was passed down through the years. And so we'd go out there and just absolutely loved it, had a great time. And nothing happens if you don't dream it. So the next challenge was starting into college. Fortunately, I had access to good oil field jobs, and I was able to earn enough money to put myself through college. That was a crazy experience. My advisor was a Dr. Hensey. He was a well-known pharmacologist from the early 1900s. Remember, this was the 60s, and he was up in his 70s, still enjoying being up there at UT doing what he did. And he took me on as a personal project, and he decided what I was going to take. He nearly killed me because he put me in courses I wasn't qualified to take. And anyway, 157 hours later, I'm 6 hours short of a degree, where most of the times 130 hours gets you a degree. I applied for dental school, and fortunately was accepted because I was just another average kid. Because of this terrific background that Dr. Hinsey crammed down my throat, I absolutely aced the DentCat exam. And so there's anytime you look at the applicants, they had 1,000 qualified applicants, meaning that they'd taken the basics for dental school, and I was just another poor kid. When I got to college, my rich roommates always called me the oil field trash, a title I've worn proudly all of my life. But anyway, I got into dental school on the second round, where they took the bulk of students, and so the rest of that was history. I started into dental school like everybody else, and realized that I was coasting off of what I had as an undergraduate. So I started looking at ways to make a living, took on an externship at the VA hospital. The worst mistake I ever made in my life was playing football when I was in high school. I was not built to be a football player. I was built to be a track star and a runner. And there was very little coaching back then. Football was king. Track was looked down on. And so I basically blew off sports. But I played in the band, and we loved the band. We had some very influential older brothers and sisters who did not tolerate failure. We won best of class in the state at the competition in Austin. I started out on a trumpet and had a mouth injury, a scar that I still have on my lip, and then the mouthpiece of a baritone fit just right. So that's what I did throughout my band career. And our older brothers and sisters would not allow failure. The one thing that we had, our shining star, was a band, and they pushed the most unlikely kids into it. And what I can say is that our entire class prospered, that we ended up with CPAs, lawyers, a dentist, some of the most unlikely kids coming from very poor backgrounds. I was, my brother, sister, and myself were the first generation to have a college degree. So my dad started a program. We had a junior college open up. Anybody wanted to go to college, they had a full ride scholarship. All they had to do was figure out how to get room and board. The vast majority of them could stay at home, stay with a friend, stay with a grandparent or something. They even had transportation from Refugio to Beeville. And my dad had headed that up because he was orphaned when he was 17, had fight and scratch to get his 2 years of college. And during the Depression, he was able to get a good job, and he did much of what I did. He started looking for where were the best jobs. The best jobs were in the oil field. I will say again that both of them were very badly damaged by the Great Depression, and I knew that I was going to have to make my own way when I was 14. And what they did was they provided me with the room and board and a place to stay, and then I provided the rules as a coming 15-year-old. What could be done, what could be said, and so forth. And set my sights on going to the University of Texas. I knew I couldn't afford anything else. Certainly none of the fancy schools like Baylor, SMU, or whatever. And was able to get into Texas as the top 10%. And that was a really, really good move. I got a great background. When I got into dental school, most of what the didactics were for the first year of medical school or dental school, I had already covered in undergraduate. So it took very little study, and then I was still responsible for myself. And so I started what they call an externship at the VA hospital. And basically, I got the training I needed as a med tech and was able to hire on at a couple of the hospitals as a phlebotomist. Worked my way up to where my last 2 years I was actually running the weekend laboratory at a private hospital, Rosewood General in Houston, Texas. And that was another wonderful learning experience because I worked with some very good diagnosticians, some very good physicians. And one of the best things I learned from them was they look at something and say, I don't know what the heck that is. Let's go find somebody smarter than I am. And they knew that I was a top flight laboratory technician. I understood the test, and they had no hesitation whatsoever to ask this lowly dental student what those tests meant, what I thought about it. I came in, they put in the first automated system. I learned everything, how to do all the chemistries by hand. Then they put in the first automated system, which was called an SMA 1260, which would do 12 tests in 60 minutes. And so another friend of mine, Earl Merritt, who went on to be a surgeon in Kerrville Medical School, Baylor graduate, he and I would race each other, would race the SMA 1260, and we could beat it. So we took on the job at teaching the med tech students we were teaching the med tech students. And why I didn't apply for the med tech degree, I had everything there that I needed to. I guess it never occurred to me. But I'm still 6 hours short of an undergraduate degree, University of Texas. So, and that's not an out of the question possibility. I may eventually go ahead and petition for that, say that I have the proper hours, and will you please grant me a degree? Earl and I had the sixth sense of where somebody was deficient, where they were struggling, and we would take them to the side, isolate them. They wouldn't be there if they were stupid, you know. So we would figure out where their deficiencies were, which is the going back and looking at the really good teachers in my life, like Mr. Kurji, Mutzi Fowle, Miss Jane Fisher. I saw her here a while back at a wedding, and I thanked her again for the background that she helped give me 60-something years ago.
Does she remember you?
Oh, yeah, of course, you know. But, there are people like that, and if you watch and you listen, you can learn, and you can learn how the most important thing that you can do in your life is stewardship, is to pass it on. Okay.
Is to what?
Pass it on.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I enjoyed that. Merrill enjoyed it so much that he married one of those girls. Well, the the first week of dental school, I was excited getting there, and at the end of the first week, as a scientist, I knew what they were teaching us was complete and total BS. They were not teaching from the science. It wasn't logical. It wasn't reasonable. It made absolutely no sense and still doesn't. Oh, I ran into it several times with several teachers. Before that, I can think back into junior high into running into that type of person, and then running into somebody who is absolutely outstanding, like Pat Daly, who is our English teacher, Mr. Doty, who was my sixth grade science teacher, inspirations, again, Miss Fisher in high school, knowing how to stimulate people, how to see where the class was, what to do. And I remember as early as my freshman or sophomore year in high school, specifically, I can remember one of my classmates, Gorman Walton, struggling in algebra. And I made him stay after class one day, and all it is ratios. Okay, and I started working with him. Here's the ratio. Here's how you do it. Here's how you figure it out. And all of a sudden the light bulb turned on, and he was passing algebra. So that was he was a kid I knew all of my life. Started kindergarten with, and here we were in high school. And he nobody had spotted what his problem was. I understood it because I struggled with it for a while until I figured out it was just logic and common sense. And by the time I got to dental school, I carried that scientific mode with me, and I knew that it was absolutely wrong. Everything that they were teaching me, go in there, extension for prevention. Who the hell cared? You know, this is because I couldn't. Part of what my being is from the book of Timothy, and it's called stewardship. It's your job. You preserve things. You pass on things better than what they were when you got there, and you have absolutely no right whatsoever to take that high-speed drill and then sink it into a tooth and run it from one end to the other without knowing what the heck you're doing to that tooth. The other gift that I had was the Willie Mays type of vision. When I played Little League Baseball, I could hit 400, which I thought was, I thought I was a big loser. Nobody ever told me 400 was good. But what would I do? I could see the ball coming. Not only could I see the ball coming, I could tell which ball it was. And then I could see the bat hit the ball where I wanted it to hit. And dadgummit, you know, I'd get put out enough where I was only hitting 400. But I didn't. But I took that vision to dental school with me, and one of the first things they did was show us the microfracturing that occurred with the high-speed drill. And then as soon as I got my hands on a high-speed drill, I could see that microfracturing. But I knew that other people couldn't see it, but I knew that it was dangerous for the tooth. So I started modifying my approach, modifying my technique, and I got into some real cantankerous confrontations with my professors. One of them, a Dr. Sewell, and they spoke about that on the our 30th graduation anniversary. That about Tim Rainey, the dental student, grabbing Sandy Sewell, dragging him down to the dean's office, and telling the dean, "Don't let him ever come back in my cubicle again." I remember walking back and then thinking, "What in the heck did I just do?" he was being prejudicial towards one of my patients. And being raised in rural South Texas, you never judged anybody by anything other than who they were. It wasn't necessarily technical. He was just being absolutely disrespectful to this wonderful lady who would have been the grandmother in any family that I was recognized for being a rebel. I was also recognized for being right.
Being what?
Being right. Okay. So it was difficult to be challenged. I remember walking into one of the most important moments was walking into Dr. Simmons' office as a sophomore, and they were requiring us to read. It was the dental publication of the time and had all the scientific articles in it. And so he just gave a lecture on using copalite varnish underneath amalgam fillings, which is, and then I read the article and I took it into him, and he kind of looked at me and didn't say anything. And then I did it a second time, and he grabbed it out of my hand, threw it down, and said, "What are you showing me this for?" And so I knew at that particular moment that I was on my own. It was up to me to make my own curriculum and do what I want to. And probably one of the moments that my classmates would remember most is when they were telling us in the lecture Crown and Bridge, you need a 5-degree taper on your crown preps. And I knew that that was technically very challenging and very difficult. So I still have the prep. I still have the, what do they call it, the ivorine teeth with the prep in it. And so I did a lingual 3/4 crown with a 5-degree taper. I took it up, and then all 5 members of the Crown and Bridge department were sitting there. And Dr. Wiegand, the head of the department, was in the middle. There were 5 of them, 2 on each side. And I took this and I put it down. I didn't set it down. I dropped it down in front of him to get everybody's attention. And he looked at it, and he looked it over and everything, passed it back and forth. He said, "Well, this won't do."
It won't do?
No, he said, it won't draw. There's not enough taper on it. Handed it back to me, so I took it, and then I spun it in front of him on the table there, and it startled everybody. I said, "Yes, it will draw. And by the way, that's the only 5-degree taper you've ever seen." The entire department got up at one time, picked it up. The whole floor went quiet again. Well, Rainey's at it again. And they stomped off, went upstairs, put it on the electron microscope grid, came back down and said, "Well, yes, it is a 5-degree taper, but it still won't draw." I said, "Watch this." I waxed it up, it would draw. I cast it up, it would draw. and I still use that. And that's what it's called is the Hollenbach technique. I read the article on these issues that nobody in the faculty was reading, and hardly any of the students were. But I read this article and about an old dentist who was the dentist to the stars. He was Dr. Hollenbach. The Hollenbach carver is named after him. L.A.
Yeah.
And he was the dentist to the stars. Gold crowns that he did in the old Western cat balloon.
What made you think you could get away with it?
Because I discovered something that's called the news media, and I would have gone to the Houston Chronicle and all 3 TV stations if they had even blinked. So I knew that they couldn't stand the publicity. There were a little bit of controversy going on then about the funding of the dental school, some other things, and so I was aware of those. And so I was getting on probably a little too big for my britches. And but I've always been that way. I would confront the bullies in high school. The committee would go see the bullies, want to know what the heck they were up to. It wasn't worth it. When I was at the ripe old age of 17, a friend of mine, the county judge's son, Ed Jeter, and I caught 17 hoodlums, illegal aliens, one of the town hoodlums tearing up one of their farmhouses, and we arrested them at gunpoint. And later on, Daryl Brecker, who was the leader of it, looked me up. He had a black eye. He wanted to, I didn't know if he was confronting me or what, but he said, I want to apologize. We had no business out there vandalizing that property like that. And he said, oh, by the way, you kept that 22 automatic pointed at me the whole time. And the other guys in the group were wanting to jump you, and they were drunk enough to try to kill you and Jeter. He said, what kept us from doing that, I kept them from doing that because you had that gun on me the whole time. He said, no, what would you have done if we had made the wrong move? I said, I was going to shoot you in the stomach first and try to kill as many of them that were coming at me as possible. And with that automatic, I think I could have stopped them. And he said, well, that's exactly what we thought you were doing. And so that's that attitude may have saved Jeter and my life at the ripe old age of 17, and it would have destroyed every one of their lives because of the politics of rural South Texas and the fact that Jeter was the county judge's son. Okay, it would not have turned out well. So anyway, and my son even called one time and wanted to know. I was in some sort of confrontation with the Texas State Board of Dental Idiots, and it was making some sort of waves news, and he called me and said, Dad, what's wrong with you? And I said, I'm Irish, son. Go watch the movie Braveheart, and then look at the names of the people who defended Texas, and our great-great-grandfather, John Carpenter, fought at San Jacinto. And so think about it. 700 Texans beat a well-prepared, well-outfitted army of 5,000. What were they thinking? And Bill mentions the Mexican standoff, and I think the better term for that is a Texican standoff. Because if you had 2 Texicans and 10 Comanches, we had them surrounded and outnumbered. When they got even with us, we jumped out from both sides, fired off a couple of shots, told them to hit the ground, and then we rounded up 17 of them at gunpoint. Jeter wanted to go back in town and get his dad, and I said, no, let's take care of it. And then I went over the gate and started in, and Jeter followed me. Okay, probably way against his better judgment, but I was going to take care of it, and we did, and it turned out good. But if you ever have to use a gun to defend yourself, which I'm one of the rare people that I've actually have used a gun 4 times in self-defense. That was the only time I actually had a shell in the chamber, just the presence of the gun. I've actually done an interview with the FBI on what to do in a gunfight. and you have maybe a minute and a half of consciousness before you pass out. So I use a minute and a half to drive myself in town, find somebody, take me to the hospital. Ed Jeter and I were the only two out there, and all I knew is that they had vandalized the property because I could hear the glass breaking. And then Jeter wanted to go into town and get his dad to get some of the deputies to follow us back out there. But I felt like that they would probably have left by then, and we never would have known. We would have known that Derek Brecker was there, and it turned out that he did cut his hand, slamming his hand through the glass. So he had a cut on his hand. He had left blood there. He would have had blood in his car. Wouldn't have been any way that he could have denied that he was responsible. But the omerta at the time, and still there, you don't squeal on your friends. And so I knew that if we were going to catch them, the 2 or 3 guys who are in there vandalizing the house, that we had to act then, and started down the road. Little did we know that they'd crammed 17 people into that station wagon. And then I climbed up on the tractor, so if they tried to jump me, it wasn't going to happen. So then, being the that would have been 1963, and being what it was then, and that was the 60s. I don't have past judgment on it. That's what it took to maintain law and order back then. I had no input, no say on that. And I told my son 20 years later, when he started dental school, I said, I'm going to teach you how to be a dentist. I'm going to teach you how to do minimally invasive dentistry. And I'm going to provide you with a top-end abrasion unit, which was the very best made at the time. And I said, you're going to write your own curriculum. You're going to do what you want to. And I remember one of the jerks made him burnish amalgam down into his minimal preps that he did on the teeth. And he called me when he was a senior and said, Dad, I've got to take the state boards and I've got to pass. And he said, I've got to do an acceptable amalgam preparation and put in an amalgam. That's part of the requirement on the state board. I don't know how to do that. And I said, son, there comes a time when you got to play the game and give them exactly what they want. So I taught him how to. You also have to realize how toxic I can be. That your very best defense is a very strong offense. Well, basically, I made them provide a course in minimally invasive dentistry. And Bill Miller of San Antonio and I went in, and I left them with all of my teaching materials, everything that they did. Dr. Summits was the head of the department, and they swore up and down that they would continue it on. So teaching them minimally invasive courses after J-Town graduated, which I knew was going to be an absolute bald-faced lie. 1 month into the first semester of the next year after he graduated, I went into the dental school and said, I'm here. I want to inspect your course on minimally invasive dentistry. Where are the air abrasion units? They couldn't even find the air abrasion units. I was there over an hour and a half before they finally found them stuffed in a closet somewhere on a third floor. I don't even know where it was in the dental school. They took them. They said, oh, yeah, well, we need this so we can teach it in pediatric dentistry. I said, y'all don't need this. You're not going to teach it. You don't want to teach it. It destroys all the curriculum that you people are comfortable with. And so I took those two, and I said, by the way, where's my microscope? I had 2 operating microscopes and that were used in our teaching courses, and then they couldn't find it.
Oh my God.
So they were selling for $15,000. It was two global microscopes that I'd gotten from the neurosurgery department at a Methodist hospital in Houston. And so I had one mounted in my office. It's still there. And the other one was on a mobile stand that we would use in our courses here and there, and other dentists could practice microscope dentistry underneath it as part of the learning curve so they could understand tooth structure. And so anyway, they finally located it. It was over in a different building, supposedly being used by the pediatric dentistry department, which I don't think they were using because it had dust all over it. So I gathered up that microscope and the two aerobrasion units I left them with, and then took them out of there because they had absolutely no intention of doing anything other than GV black extension for prevention, amalgam restorations in the dental school at the time. They knew they were wrong. They did everything they could to avoid me. I invited them. This was in the 90s, and by that time, I figured out how to do minimally invasive dentistry by 1983, and I invited them. I said, you need to come and do a study on the decade of dental work that we've done on these kids because it is bulletproof. Nothing ever happens once we bulletproof these teeth, and there's several reasons for it. And so their retort was always the same one. Why don't you just come up here? We are the dental school and do your study here. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? Take the entire population of Refugio County to San Antonio? It would make a whole lot more sense that y'all do. And I told them it is exactly the same distance from my office to yours as it is from yours to mine. Come down where it's happening and do your study and do your publications. Of course, they wouldn't do it, and still haven't. The subocclusal oblique transverse ridge, I knew that there was a solid piece of enamel in the middle of the tooth. You can ask my long-term assistant. I did this about 1982. I used loops, and I went back into the lab, and I took tooth after tooth after tooth and ran it into the grinder that we used for milling cast and milling plaster cast. And you cram it into there, and then you just move it around real slow, and you can get a pretty slick finish. So I kept seeing these structures in teeth and kept going through teeth. My curiosity, I knew that I didn't understand tooth structure, and nobody else did. And they were teaching anatomy out of 17th century dental books. And they still do, by the way. But anyway, I went through it until the point that I was back in the lab. There was a mirror right here. I'll never forget that. And then I had a whole pile of tooth dust there, and I'd done hundreds of teeth. I have no idea how many. And it was midnight. I was getting shaky. I was dehydrated. I've been at this for 8 hours or so. And then I turned, and there was a ghost in the mirror staring at me, completely covered with white. And I remember I jumped back and looked at it, and it was me, and I had white dust all over me and two little brown streaks right here underneath my nostrils because I wouldn't use a mask. And they complained the next Monday when they came to work, man, this place smells like burnt chicken feathers, which it did for at least a month afterwards. But I understand tooth structure. And then when we got into aerobrasion commercially in 1994, it was absolutely my own curiosity. I did not share it with anyone. What was the point? I do have some pictures of that, and I actually used one of the pictures from the 1980s when we first got a really good dental eye camera from Yosaka. But anyway, It was one of the first really good um, uh, self-contained dental cameras. And I still use one of those photographs showing one of those dissected teeth just as a connection with the past that made me what I am today. But I understood tooth structure. I knew the subocclusal oblique transverse ridge was there. I knew that it was the same thing as the oblique transverse ridge in the maxillary molar. And in 1994, I was trying to teach it in our first aerobrasion symposium with Kim Cooch and creative industry that was making an aerobrasion machine. And everybody was looking at me and saying, well, Rainey, we know that you know what you're talking about, but we don't. You need to go back and define it. So I called up a friend of mine I'd done an article with, Dr. George White out of Tufts University, and said, okay, tutor me through this. We need an article. And so he had a graduate student working on his PhD in pediatric dentistry, Al Shabangi, whatever. Yeah, he was he ended up as the pediatric dentist to the Saudi Arabian family. He had 5,000 charges at that time when he went back. But anyway, he and I and George White did the first article on the subocclusal oblique transverse ridge. But I kept sending things to George, and he kept coming back and saying, this is not repeatable. This is not repeatable. This is not repeatable. So anyway, I woke up at 2 in the morning as usual, and I had an image in my mind of some slides that I'd been looking at. And at that time, we were taking slides on film. You'd get a negative, and I looked at the negative, and then I projected the slide, and then I woke up. I had the image of that negative in my mind. I went down to our classroom, pulled that, and then I could see it. The subocclusal oblique transverse ridge runs from the occlusal oblique transverse ridge on the maxillary molar, as it was named for a century or more, ran from the mesial lingual cusp to the distal buccal cusp. And what I was doing was I was trying to say the lower molar did the same thing. And then when I saw that slide, I realized it ran opposite. And then we had a symposium after that where I introduced the subocclusal oblique transverse ridge as the major structural component of a mandibular molar. That gets sacrificed. If you were to take a room of 100 dentists and ask them, here is a picture or a drawing of a mandibular first molar, where is the central pit? Almost every single one of them would put a dot right in the middle of the tooth. That is a solid piece of enamel. It's part of the subocclusal oblique transverse ridge. It is sacred. It holds the tooth together, and you have absolutely no legal, ethical, or moral right to destroy that, which it is taught how to destroy it in dental schools, and you must destroy it in many of the dental schools in order to be licensed to practice dental to today. I think that is in part of 4 or 5 inspirational teachers I had along the way who encouraged that.
So you had permission to be curious.
Absolutely. And one of the most influential teachers in my life was Fred Kirchie. He was our mechanical drawing teacher. And I remember sitting in Muncie Files class, and somebody said, Tim, Kirchie's at the door and he wants to talk to you. And so I walked up there wondering, what the heck did I do wrong, you know? And he said, boy, I want you in my class.
Mm.
The Southern South Texas drawl. I said, Mr. Kirchie, my handwriting is terrible. And he said, boy, I'm not judging handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm doing is the quality of the finished product. And I want you in my class. And so the next day I showed up in his class. And what it was is I have very sweaty hands. Hydro something anyway. They actually have a name for it.
Yeah.
And when I write, then anything with a pencil eventually ends up getting smeared, and it looked terrible. And I got called down numerous times for that because teachers didn't recognize it for what it was. It's just a physiological phenomena that also gives me a terrific advantage as a dentist because I don't have any type of chapping or problems with my hands because I produce enough sweat during the day to keep them from becoming chapped or marked. But anyway, he was such a wonderful teacher. And with 2 semesters of high school mechanical drawing, whenever I got to college, I was able to tutor the mechanical drawing engineering students until they hit the end of their first semester sophomore year. Fell in with a bunch of rich students from the Silk Stocking District of Houston. There are 5 of them from River Oaks in Houston. If you're from Texas, you'll know what River Oaks is. Okay. Anyway, these guys had never seen anybody so poor. Their allowances were more than what it took me to earn to go to school for the fall and spring semester before I went back and started earning more money so that I could make it through the next school year. So, and they had this joke. They had a wonderful background in high school, which I had just average mediocre high school background. And then I had this quest for knowledge. I knew what it took to get into dental school. I knew I had to be the top of the class. And so they took me on and helped tutor me. I ended up the top grade in chemistry out of 800 students. Wasn't because of me. It was because somebody who knew what they were doing took the time to tutor me in chemistry. That stewardship, and I was able to pass that on to other people throughout my educational career. I had the hands, I had the ability, I had the knowledge, I could pass the tests. One of the very last things that I did was my senior year, we had to take the national board test. And by that time, I had a weekend job at running the laboratory at Rosewood Hospital. I mentioned that before. It was a private, upper class private hospital in
That was when you
Houston.
were in dental school.
That was when I was in dental school. And at that particular point in my career, I was actually making more money than the dean. I had to cut my earnings off at $24,800 because in that period of time, if you hit $25,000, anything over $25,000 became conservatory. But I was actually making more money than the dean by that time. But the point of the story is I hit 2 weekends my senior year where I worked 53 hours from 6 o'clock Friday to 8 o'clock Monday morning. So, running that lab, it was just one of those things where one emergency after the other would come in, and I couldn't ever get free to go in and take anything but a very short cat nap. So I wandered in 30 minutes late into the national board test,
Oh, jeez.
and the entire Texas State Board of Dental Examiners and the dean of the dental school and everybody was sitting up front, and it was an automatic failure if you came in late or screwed up.
What?
They failed one kid because he came in flip-flops and shorts, and they didn't think he was professional enough to become a dentist, so they made him sit out for 6 months. And so I wandered up there to the front, and James Orr, who was on the faculty of the Crown and Bridge Department, was one of my defenders. And so he was sitting up towards the middle in the front, and this dental student wanders in, and they asked me, well, what's your excuse, son? And I said, quote and unquote, I've been up all night. I'm not in a very good mood, and people die if I don't answer the call. And man, they hit this huddle, and and I stepped back. Of course, the entire room was, well, Rainey's at it again. And so finally, they motioned me up there and handed me the test and said, okay, you can go ahead and take the test. And a lot of those guys have been cramming all weekend long, but I had a good enough background that I knew all I had to do was pass the test. I wasn't trying to ace this one. So I go back, find an empty desk, and I actually wore a watch then, checked the watch, made sure that they could see me check the watch, put the paper down, laid my head down, and took a nap. And then I finished the quiz on time, and I walked up there and with a grin gave it to James Orr. And everybody literally dived on it. And I turned around and started walking out the door. And when I hit the door, I turned around and Orr was looking at me, grinning with the thumbs up. He's a nice guy. He'll do anything for you until you cross him intentionally. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then it's not worth it. I don't bother to go to every fist fight I'm invited to. Bill Dome got in on one of those fist fights. If you'll remember, it was May, I think the 17th, 2007, where they were having a joint meeting of the Texas State Board and the Texas Dental Association. And a friend of mine, Herwald from Katy, Texas, was the president of the Texas State Board. They were all sitting up there. And I came in from the ranch. I'd gotten into a real cluster fight out there. And it had been raining. I was muddy. I was dirty. Didn't have time to go change clothes. So I looked like one of the maintenance men who'd had a bad day when I showed up. So I did what I usually do and sat at the back of the room so I could read it. And I almost stood up to sign in when this little twerp, wannabe cowboy on the state board with boots and hat and the whole nine yards, and probably hadn't seen a cow in his life. And he thought he was the last one to testify. So he started talking him what it was. It was a controversy over whether hygienists should be able to give injections or not. Yeah. And Bill's now remembering that that's only been 20 years or so. But anyway, I was standing behind this little twerp, and I was a full head higher than he was. And he was getting real passionate about, and you can't let hygienists do this. And I had this stupid, I'm not going to say it, but grin on my face. looking back and forth like an idiot. And Herwall was trying to hold his composure. He had been to 2 or 3 of our courses. He knew me very well, and he knew what was going on. And he was trying to stifle a laugh, and he finally couldn't keep it anymore. And he started chuckling, and then it cracked up everybody up there. And so this guy was passionate about it, and he started thinking, man, they're laughing at me. And he was getting madder and madder, and the veins were popping out on his neck. And finally, he turned around and literally ran into me.
Oh, man.
And then I fired the shot that Bill Dom sent around the world. I said, quote and unquote, "This is not about you. This is not about how much money you can make. It's about soft tissue management and the job." And I started turning, and I was raising my voice as I was walking down the aisle, and I leaned over and almost poked my finger in his chest and said, "It's about the service we can provide for the patient." And then I walked out to a completely quiet room, and somebody picked it up, put it on the internet, and then Bill Dome picked it up and sent it around the world, and there was Rainey standing up for the patient. There's times when you're going to be invited to all kinds of confrontations in your life, and when is it worth it? You know, you can stay in an argument, and everybody knows people like that. They're in cahoot, they're crosswise with their neighbors, they're crosswise with their family, they're banned from functions, and et cetera, and so forth. But if I'm going to go to a confrontation, it's not for me. I'm going to be looking out for somebody else's best interest. Don't go into a confrontation unless you know you're absolutely, completely dead right. And when you're absolutely, completely dead right, then do exactly what I did, cram it down their throats as I remind them on proper occasions that the worst thing that you can possibly hear from somebody else is, "I was right." I picked up a stalker at one of the clinics, and so she filed a complaint with the Texas State Board that my loops were dirty. Well, my loops were not dirty. They were scratched up because of their abrasion, and I had to get rid of them with every 3 or 4 years. This idiot goes back and he revived that thing after I'd already put it to rest. So I did what you're supposed to do, and I filed. You don't need a lawyer for this. I filed for a complete revelation of all of their records, emails, and everything else having to do with this particular complaint, which they properly replied that we can't do anything. We cannot reveal this because it is an ongoing investigation against you, and which we've all heard before, but they knew that they didn't stand on a good place there. So what I would do on the anniversary every year is I would refile my request until the last time I refiled it was 3 years and 1 week after the complaint was filed, which meant the Texas statute of limitations had run out, and I was filing a complaint back against them under the federal statute of limitations of violating my civil rights, which strips you of all of your protection, your liability insurance, everything else. And that's pretty well universal when you file a civil rights complaint. So wouldn't you know it, they couldn't find those records. They didn't know where they were. And so 4 years, 11 months, 2 weeks later, I filed the same complaint, which reignited the statute of limitations. And then I did that for 15 years until it was a form of self-protection that this guy is so toxic, we can't push him around. It's not worth it. So you don't do that unless you're absolutely, completely, and totally dead right. Yes, make sure that that's where you are, that you understand your rights, and then don't ever back down. It's been my experience as a courtroom advocate, a very experienced and very effective courtroom advocate over the years for people who are right. They're generally targeted by people, the half of the members of the boards who are literally psychotic. They're narcissistic, they're sociopaths, they can't be wrong, they know everything there is to know about dentistry because God ordained them and when they were handed their dental degree. And and these are the people who are the very easiest to beat because they are overconfident. They know that they're right when they're absolutely dead wrong. And you give them 500 yards of monofilament and then set the hook. I'm giving away all my secrets here, by the way. Your best defense. No one ever won anything from a defensive position. Bill was asking me about diplomacy and so on and so forth. Essentially, what you're doing is you're defending yourself through a logical argument with people who are irrational and illogical. That's by definition. That's how you define a narcissist, and that's how you define a sociopath. Okay, so why would you want to waste your time doing that when the very best defense is going to be a very strong offense? Figure out where their weak spot is. First of all, make sure that you're in the right. Give them plenty of time to show their hand, to get overconfident, and then just absolutely screw them to the wall. And then don't ever let up. And every time you see them, from then on out, I still see members of that board, however many years, 2007, 2017. So it's nearly 20 years later, I see members of that board, and we'd be walking down the hall, and I'll smile at them, point at them, and say, I was right. Really ruined their entire day at that particular point, because that's who they are. Just recently, the Texas State Board of Dental Idiots finally capitulated, and they're going to allow dental hygienists to give injections. My God, think about what I did as a dental student. I became a top-notch phlebotomist without any certification, without any formal training other than somebody telling me how to do this. And I became a very good phlebotomist because I'm a dentist. I've got good hands. I could feel those veins. I could hit those veins to the point where if they were having problems in the OR, hitting a vein, they would say, go get the dentist. Heck, I was just a dental student, but I'd go out there and start their IVs for them, and I've done that throughout my lifetime, but you have to be able to get what's in your head down to the tip ends of your fingers. And the question is, how do you spot that kid who's got talent to begin with, like Fred Kirchie somehow or another spotted me, and then presented himself as a mentor and didn't really give me a choice, okay? I was going to go to his class, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer, okay? And so, and I've done that numerous times over the years, sit down with a kid and talk to him. And the first thing I do is ask them, what do you want? Most of them have never given 1 minute's thought to that. Okay, so how are you going to get there? Okay, And I can remember clearly one of those people was my roommate in college, Archie Hoyt, who had everything a kid could ever want handed to him. This kid was a freshman in high school, and he was driving the Corvette. Grandparents owned a series of pharmacies around Hearne, Texas. And so Archie got up there, and we got near the end of that first semester, and Archie wasn't going to class. It was impossible to tutor him and bring him up to where he needed to be. Archie, you're flunking out of school. No, I'm not. Archie, what are your grades? You've got to have some reality here. What is it you're going to do? I said, you have flunked out of school. You can't make these finals. And I was so right on that Archie didn't even bother to take some of his finals. He knew that he had completely blown that entire semester because he was a spoiled, rotten brat. Everything had been handed to him. And then he was all downtrodden and everything. He said, Rainey, what am I going to do? And I said, Archie, you need some discipline. You're going to leave here. You're going to go enlist in the Marines. And you're going to write home from boot camp and tell everybody that you have taken over your life. Several years later, I called in a prescription to pharmacy in Hearne, Texas, and this voice said, a familiar voice said, is this Tim Rainey? I said, yes, it is. And he said, I want you to know that you gave me the very best advice I ever got in my life. He said, one of that was to forget that you ever went to UT. You cannot transfer those failing hours. When you get out of the military and you're on the GI Bill and making your own way, then enlist in the pharmacy school at the University of Houston, start all over again. You've got some background there, and you are going to make it because you can't afford not to make it. You're going to inherit millions if you can become a pharmacist. And he said, Rainey, that's the best advice I ever got in my entire life. Okay, so sometimes it is your responsibility to see somebody with potential to step up and ask them that question. I absolutely did not have to do it. When you go through Houston, you'll see Kelsey Siebold clinics. One of the kids that I tutored was one of the smartest kids I've ever seen in my life, and that was Randy Siebold. That was his dad's legacy that he left him. That is Dr. Randy Siebold. He didn't have the snowball chance in hell of getting into medical school unless Tim Rainey had stayed up all night with him to give him to pry back out of him the knowledge that he had picked up going to the premier high school in Houston at River Oaks. The joke used to be that there's a country club on both ends of River Oaks Drive, River Oaks Country Club and River Oaks High School. And so anyway, that was another kid that I tutored because he asked me. I don't volunteer very often. I don't put it this way. I don't volunteer. I may ask the question, where are you going and how are you going to get there? And if that kid is willing to engage in a conversation, then I start trying to lead them down to the path. Here's what you can do. So he knew that I knew my stuff in chemistry because Dave Griffiths and other spoiled, rotten River Oaks brats had taught me chemistry. And so I'll never forget that test, 200 questions on it. I've been up all night. Half the kids there, their parents were physicians, so they had various types of amphetamines diet pills, as they called them back then, to keep us awake. And I remember sitting there staring at that paper for 30 minutes, and I couldn't make sense out of it. And finally I got up and said, man, you've got to pull yourself together. And I went down, and then I started running through the test. And then I got to the end of the 200 and started back up, and I quit. When I got the test back, it was 99.5. I missed the very first question on the quiz. Absolutely blew the curve because there were two brothers in that class that had 96s, and I had a 99.95. But that was because somebody took the time to act as stewards for this poor piece of oil-filled trash from Refugio, Texas. So that's an obligation. You pass it on. Okay? It's not a choice. When I was growing up, we had a wonderful Presbyterian minister, Alan Smith. And I remember being mesmerized as he would go through the books of the Bible. And then I would go back and read the books of the Bible and understand what he was talking about. And I still will go back and read the book of Timothy. That's my name. That's my namesake, Tim Rainey. And that's where it comes from. If you read the book of Timothy, it is basically about stewardship. And so, and again, that's an obligation. That's in the Bible. You leave the place better than the way you found it. You do not have the right to take. You do not have the right to destroy anything. You do not have the right to destroy an inheritance. Somebody built that. You don't take it to Las Vegas and blow it. You don't stuff it up your nose with cocaine. Now then, I've just named two things, and everybody who's listened to this interview knows somebody who fits right into that category. And where did their life end up? What you see is a trail of despair, destruction, divorces, abandoned children, everything you don't want to leave as a legacy. So if you want to leave a legacy, then you sit down, you figure out where you want to go and how the heck you're going to get there. And then you find other kids who are lost, who don't have that stewardship, and you'd be surprised at what an impact you can make on people out there. Sense of satisfaction, what can you give me? Brand new solid gold Cadillac, or somebody walking up and saying, with gratitude, I appreciate what you did for me, for my family, for my loved one, or somebody else. That's worth more than all the gold on the planet.